Hi, in this section we are going to talk about attacks against the session management of an application. But for that, first we have to understand how session management usually works. And this is what this lecture is about. So if you're a developer, you probably know all of this already, but it might be a good refresher. So let's start. So first of all, as I mentioned in the lecture about HTTP, it's a stateless protocol. This means that if you send two requests to the same server, it has no idea that they came from the same person. So here is your browser, and here is the web application. And when you send the request, and then you send another request, the web application has no idea that this request come from the same person. Of course, it will see the IP address, but the IP address doesn't really tell anything. If, for instance, if you go to a cafeteria and browse the internet from there, then you will have the same IP address as everybody else there. This was a big problem for web applications. To solve this, the idea of the session came along. The session is basically just an object kept in memory by the web application so that it can identify each user. So when you come and you send your first request to the server, so basically you open the page, then the web application will create session in memory. It will have an ID, and if it already knows your username, that it will have your username, etc. And then in the response, you get this ID back, and every time when you send the request again, this ID will be in the request. And that's how the web application knows that this ID is for this user. If another user comes and sends a request, then the application creates another session for that user and gives it the ID as well. And after that, that user will always use that ID. In the browser, usually this ID is stored as a cookie, and that's how it's transferred to each request, because the browser will attach the cookies for that actual application to each request automatically. One important point is that the session ID has to be protected. If you're logged in and somebody can steal or guess your session ID, then he can hijack your session because the server will think it's you. So if, for instance, this one is an attacker and he figures out your ID and sends a request with your ID, then the browser will think that this user is you. So let's talk a little bit about how cookies work. When the server sends a cookie in an HTTP response, browser, let's say for instance this is Facebook. You open Facebook, log in, you get an ID, then the browser will store that for Facebook you have an ID as a cookie. And every time when you send a request to Facebook, it will contain the ID as a cookie. When the server issues a cookie, it can define three things. The domain, which is facebook.com, then the path, which will be either just slash or some directory, and a time frame, how long this cookie should be valid. And the browser will store all this data. So whatever you send a request to Facebook, it will check whether it has a corresponding cookie or not, which fits all of these three. So it's still in the time frame. It sent either to this path or any subdirectory, and it's sent to facebook.com. If the server specifically defines the domain, that means that the cookie will be valid for Facebook and all subdomains. So it will be also valid for whatever images.facebook.com. So it will be sent there automatically. If the browser doesn't specify the domain, then it will be only set for the domain which actually sent the cookie. So after you log in on a page, you will have a session cookie which will be sent with each request, and that's how the server knows that it's you. Of course, the cookies are the core of user tracking and marketing, but that's absolutely another story. So let's see how all these things work with our application, the Voice of the Emperor. So open your Kali and open your Burp Suite and make sure it's connected. You can either restart Kali, or you can make sure that there is no cookies there. So for that, come to Preferences and Privacy, and here you can see Recent History and choose Everything, and here also Everything. That will delete any cached data in your browser. Let's go back and then load the application. So the page has loaded. Let's go to Burp and see what happened here. So as you can see, the first request just received a redirect with slash at the end, and then it was this one. And then when you look at the request, there is no cookies in the request. But if you look at the response, then you see that there is the set cookie header with this cookie anchor CMS and then hopefully random value. And then here are the attributes I explained. This tells the browser when this cookie should expire and the allowed maximum age of the cookie. And here the path. So this means that this cookie is valid for all subpaths under the root of this domain. And if you check any subsequent requests, you will see that the cookie is sent in any further requests automatically. It's always there. We can also check our cookies in the browser. In the developer tools, Ctrl-Shift-C opens it, or you can come here and choose developer tools and toggle tools, or open the inspector. What we need is the storage. You might not have that open. Then you can come to the settings and here check the storage tools. So go to storage, and then here are the cookies, and under the cookies you see that for this domain there is one cookie called anchor CMS. Here is the path, this is the domain, here are the dates and the value, and then some other attributes which we'll talk about later. The cookie is anchor CMS, it's for this path, and the domain is just the IP address because it doesn't have a host name. And then here are the specified dates, and this is the cookie value. And this is a cookie flag. There are two important cookie flags. One is the HTTP only, which says that the cookie cannot be accessed by JavaScript. That's very important when you do a cross-site scripting, because that decides whether you can read the session cookie with the cross-site scripting attack. We will see that when we learn about cross-site scripting. And there is another flag which is not shown here. It's called the secure flag, that defines whether the cookie should be sent through unencrypted or only through encrypted channels. Basically, if the secure flag is true, then the cookie will be only sent if the web page is opened through the HTTPS connection and not just HTTP. A cookie can be either a session cookie, which will be lost when you close your browser, or it can be permanent, which will be written to disk when you close your browser and loaded again when you open the browser. Basically, that's how you can stay logged in Gmail or in Facebook, even though you restart your computer or close your browser, because it will be saved to a file and then read again when you open it. Many applications have a lot of cookies. Most of them are actually used for marketing or for tracking or similar. Let's just open another page. And if we open the developer tools here and go to storage, and you can see it has plenty of cookies. For us, the most important thing is to find out which cookie is the session token. I can tell you now, not the one which is called here session, because that only means that the cookie will be removed when you close the browser. To find out which one is the session token, you will get used to it. Sometimes it's obvious, because when it's a Tomcat, then it will be called probably JSessionID or something similar. So you will get used to it, how the frameworks usually call the session cookie. So when it's not obvious by just looking at it, then you have to test it. What you can do is, if you can log into the website, then you log in, and then you start to send the same request over and over again, and always delete one cookie. And at the point when you remove a cookie, after that you get an authorization error, then that was your session cookie. Because after removing that, the server will not know anymore who are you, so you're not authorized anymore. So let's recap this lecture quickly. We learned that the web application uses session objects to identify users in the stateless HTTP protocol. There is always some kind of session ID, which is sent to the user and mostly stored as a cookie in the browser. The cookie is then automatically attached to each request sent to the issuing domain. So if you want a little exercise, you can go back to the Who is Your Daddy application, implement a session management for it in PHP. When you open the site, you get a session token, and when you submit a username, then that username will be stored in the session. And whenever you come back, then the site should check whether you already submitted a username or not. And if you have, then it fills out the name automatically without you submitting the name. It's a good exercise, but it will take some time. If you manage to do it, you can post it in the comments so that everybody else sees it. All right, thank you for watching. In the next sections, we are going to look at some attacks against the session management. So it will be pretty interesting. So see you there. Bye.
Join me, and I will complete your training.